You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. Doing something a little different this week. We have an international flavor to BioTalk podcast, and we have a partner to the state of Maryland from Quebec, Canada, and a couple of very interesting guests for BioTalk today. Our first guest is Laurent Waessa, who is the Senior Business Development Advisor, Life Sciences and MedTech for the Quebec Government in the New York City office. Laurent, welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you very much indeed, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with Marina. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all our friends who will be having a good interest in listening to us after our talk. So yes, indeed, I'm based in New York City with Quebec office. That's the provincial office of Quebec Government in New York City. Sitting in New York, we do have the great pleasure of covering the beautiful state of Maryland. That's why I'm here today, and thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome, and it's great to catch up again as we see you annually, generally at the International Bio Meetings. But now we have to do it virtually. Our second guest is Marina Massingham, who's the CEO of Aifred, a digital health company in Quebec. Both Laurent and Marina are also going to be participating in another event, which we'll talk about later, but I might as well give it a little promo now. On March 25th, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, there's going to be a digital health forum sponsored by the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore and BioHealth Innovation. And two of our guests and stars of that forum are going to be Marina and Laurent. So we'll talk more about that as we get into this interview with you later, but we'll give the listeners a chance to get that on their calendars because it's going to be a very interesting webinar for all. So let's roll into this, and we'll start with Laurent to talk a little bit about Quebec, talk about what he does there, a little bit about his personal background. And you keep hearing Laurent, I say little bit, because I know sometimes you'd like to expand quite a bit on your backgrounds, and you're very proud of what you do day in and day out. So how about a brief introduction into yourself personally and your role?
So really the role of having an office of Quebec in New York is actually not to be New York centric, although we enjoy our time when we're in the office in Rockefeller Center. Whenever you're in town, please stop by and say hello when we reopen, which hopefully will be soon, and take a chance to go beyond and look at mapping opportunities for those collaborations that we want to promote and facilitate between Quebec companies in life sciences and medtech and all those stakeholders in Maryland. For the purpose of doing this and advancing a pipeline of business opportunities, we have a team of colleagues in key sectors, one of them being in life sciences and medtech, and that's a sector that I have a great chance of covering. I could go a little bit beyond, but maybe I'll have a chance to talk a little bit further after Marina on the ecosystem in Quebec and why it makes sense to all those stakeholders in Maryland to have a talk and listen to us and do business with us.
Great, thank you. Marina, let's talk a little bit about your background, and let's talk also about just a brief introduction on Aifred and what you're doing today.
Thank you very much, Rich. It's a pleasure to join you both today. Thank you for the invitation. My background is in management consulting and life sciences. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not originally from Canada. I'm from London in the UK. I've lived in the States as well during my career. And I joined Aifred in January of 2019 as a professional CEO. So Aifred is actually my third healthcare startup in Canada. I am very passionate about our mission, which is to help doctors to make better decisions in the care of their patients with mental health conditions, starting with depression. So my job for the last 2 years has been to lead and build the Aifred team.
You're a serial entrepreneur. I think the listeners might be interested a little bit just about your past history with a couple of other startups and what got you into this entrepreneurial world to begin with.
I'd be glad to share more. So I arrived in Canada 7 years ago without a job and without knowing the country or the city of Montreal at all. I have a background, as I mentioned, in life sciences, and I used to work at Novartis. I landed here in Canada, got a call from a former colleague of mine who said, hey, do you fancy starting a specialty pharmaceutical company? I was here and I thought, well, why not? Let's test the waters on this. We founded the company in 2014. We had successful exit in 2015. I worked for the company, also a startup, that acquired us for a couple of years before joining Aifred as my third.
We need to get some of your genes transferred into some of the other entrepreneurs that would like to do their first one successful so they can go on to their second and third one, Marina. So congratulations on your progress. Let's go back to Laurent a second. Even though you're in the New York City office, you have a great knowledge of the Quebec life science and biohealth ecosystem. So a lot of people that are listening don't know anything about what's going on in that industry within Quebec. So, Laurent, why don't you give us a little background about why people in the United States or even Maryland or anywhere else where our listeners are listening from would be interested in interacting with your ecosystem you have in Quebec?
First of all, I'd like to start by just mentioning why is Quebec unique as a hub in terms of combining key expertise for the future in biopharmaceuticals, medtech, in digital health. So I'd like to give a few examples. We'd call them fun facts. For the past 10 years, Quebec has spent more than any other province in Canada on R&D in proportion to its GDP. We have about 30% of Canada research and development jobs in Quebec. About 40% of all Canadian companies doing research and development are in Quebec. In terms of the infrastructure and investment, I'd like to give a few examples. Just recent example of key hospitals in Montreal that have seen some new investments. One is the Centre Hospitalier of University of Montreal, so-called CHUM, which is one of the three that got some recent investment. The other one is McGill University Health Center. And the third one is of Saint Justine, also in Montreal. In terms of key sectors, that actually translate in key expertise that Quebec has in several fields that I'd like to mention. Start with neuroscience and mental health, because that's what's going to take a lot of our time for this broadcast. And I'd like to add also the oncology sector, cardiovascular and metabolic, then also aging, infectious diseases, cellular therapy, regenerative medicine, medical imaging, precision medicine, including genetics and genomics and proteomics, and finally, big data and AI. I'd like to give also some example of where do we find key companies when they come over to the US market and looking for partnerships, collaboration, such as companies that Marina is representing. Well, we have about 10 key discovery, development, and commercialization centers located across Quebec. And I'd like to name a few of them. One of them is in pharma and biotech, ADMAR, BioInnovation. We have another one called ERICOR. Then there is CQDM. We have also C3I and Catalyst. Those are the 5 that I'd like to list on the biopharma side. And we also have 5 on the medtech, also on the health tech sector. One is the TransMedTech Institute. Another one is Centech. Then there is MedTech, CTS, and finally D3, which I'd like to mention at the end, because this is actually how we got to know and to meet with Marina and got introduced about, I believe, 2 years ago and start working on opportunities in the US market. As a way of also helping to position Quebec, I'd like to mention that there was a recent study that was done by FDI Benchmark in 2019 that was comparing 20 key metro areas in Canada and the US. Quebec, in terms of metro center, I think that they took Montreal, but came first in terms of most competitive operating costs in clinical trials and R&D, as well as biopharma type of manufacturing activities. I'd like to give a chance to people who have an interest to reach out to us so that we can further explore and to detail what that means and how that translates into opportunities for some collaboration. But one that comes to mind to me is with the amount of activity that's being done in Maryland, thanks to your great companies. I believe that we are very well positioned in Quebec to be a partner of choice in your not only biomanufacturing, but also in clinical research, as well as those great companies coming from this ecosystem that we'd like to introduce and position for some collaboration here in Maryland.
Thank you for that introduction. And it sounds like a very robust ecosystem and very diversified, and would be a great place for people to partner who want to enter into the Canadian market, since you're one of the major Canadian markets for people to try to penetrate. So we'll learn more about that as we go further into this podcast, Laurent. We're going to flip it back to Marina, though, and really learn more about Aifred, the company, and learn about sort of its evolution, how it started, where it is today. You probably came in as the new CEO, maybe help pivot it. You can tell us where your focus is today. And then also we can wind up this segment by talking about how you ran into Laurent and what the benefits are in working with the Quebec government, and why you guys feel that that's a robust area for you to be working in.
So Aifred is a digital health company based out of Montreal. We were incorporated in 2017. And a key factor in the initiation of the company was the Global IBM Watson AI X Prize that I'll talk about a little bit later. We were started by 4 young founders, students at McGill, who had a real passion to solve a problem that they saw in Canada and also globally around how to improve the care of patients with mental health conditions. So today, Aifred focuses on clinical decision support in 2 areas. One is treatment management, helping a physician to understand where a patient is in the disease cycle and what to do next. And we've built an AI model for treatment selection, understanding how individual patients will respond to the wide selection of first-line treatments available to them today. And again, I'm going to refer to the X Prize because we're competing in the X Prize with that AI model for treatment selection. And we really, as a company, are a product of the fantastic startup ecosystem we see here in Montreal and in the wider region of Quebec. A couple of things I'd like to highlight is one, some of the excellent accelerators that a few of which Laurent had already referred to. So we did go through District 3 and Sontec. Sontec was recently named as one of the top accelerators in the world. And these accelerators are great at taking companies from initial concept, very small first team, through to prototyping, concept validation, finding product market fit, getting your first investment, and all the way through to a young company such as Aifred is today. A second thing is that the funding in Quebec by the Quebec government is generous and very suitable for each stage of development, certainly in the case of Aifred, particularly when it comes to refining, testing and piloting our technology. That support has been very valuable. And also, but certainly not least, the wonderful network of business development advisors such as Laurent. For us, sitting here in Quebec, particularly during a pandemic, we can't travel. We have no opportunities to develop our network face-to-face. Laurent has been fantastic in plugging us into new networks, introducing us to you, Rich, and your team, and making sure that we continue to build our networks and able to explore the US market, particularly at this stage where we're ready to initiate our first pilots in the US. We're preparing for our first clinical trials in the US. He's really been instrumental in helping us to move forward and build those connections and prepare for our entry into the US market.
You talked a little bit about the basics of Aifred, but you mentioned treatment selection as one of the primary areas that you focus. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Today, there are a vast number of first-line treatments available in depression to treat patients. But there is no way for a doctor, no matter how great a conversation they have with their patient or how extensive, to really understand how an individual patient will respond to any of those first-line treatments available. So what they tend to do today is the same thing they did 20 years ago. They take a trial and error approach to treatment selection. They pick a drug they're comfortable with, they try it with the patient. Works great. If it doesn't, they try the next one and the next one. Unsurprisingly, this approach isn't terribly effective. So 67% of patients fail to respond to their first treatment. Up to a third will have failed to respond by their fourth unique treatment. And this is a lot of suffering for the patient, for their families, and the chances of getting that patient to remission worsen with each treatment trial. And what we aim to do is to make sure that the doctor is equipped to make a better informed treatment selection decision, get the patient onto the right drug so that they can reach remission faster and more patients within a given population will reach remission.
I guess this was a concept for 4 young students at McGill. And I guess they entered, and you're going to expand on this, the IBM Watson X Prize competition. They entered into that competition in 2017, and that's what created the formation of the company?
Yes, they actually entered in December of 2016.
Oh, 16. Okay.
So for those of you who may not be familiar with the competition, this is a global multi-year competition aimed at identifying companies who are using AI to solve the world's grand challenges. That's a pretty big, hairy goal right there. And it is not a health competition. This is open to any industry. So we've been competing with people in health tech, clean tech, fintech, any application of AI against a grand challenge. Now, depression is a grand challenge. It is, according to the WHO, the leading cause of medical disability worldwide. 1 in 9 people around the world will be touched by depression during their lifetime. And so it was an ideal competition for us to enter. I think 10,000 companies were interested, 700 entered. We incorporated as a condition of the X Prize in 2017. And this brilliant team has been performing very well throughout the competition. We were number 2 in the world in the first round, number 1 in the world in the second round. When we got to the semi-finals, we became the last remaining team, not only from Quebec, but all of Canada. And we were able to announce last month that we were one of the top 3 finalists in the world. And I think one of the great things about the competition is it really is an endorsement of the tech that we've built. The judges are some of the finest minds in AI in the world. And the way they've been judging our technology has not only been on the quality of the build and our ability to impact the problem, which is very key to progress in this competition, but also they've been rigorous around safety, around ethics, and they've built those aspects into the fabric of the company from a very early stage. So we feel immensely privileged to have been part of the competition, immensely grateful to have got this far, and we're keeping our fingers crossed for this summer and the final when the competition wraps up.
Well, congratulations. It sounds like global competition and you're faring very well. And if they pick a winner this summer, what does the winner get?
The winner gets a $3 million prize pot. So it's $3 million for first, $1 million for second, and $500,000 for third.
Anyway, you're in the money already. So it's just a matter of degrees.
Absolutely.
Congratulations and good luck for this summer.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's talk a little bit more about what some of your future goals are. And this is where Laurent fits in again and how we got connected. Laurent helped negotiate, I understand, an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the state of Maryland for collaboration. So, Laurent, let's talk a little bit about how that evolved and what's involved in an MOU with a state like Maryland.
As we all know, we're in a great industry in the life sciences, medtech sector, primarily an industry of collaboration. We just need to read the news to see how important and how critical it is for all of us to advance those collaboration. We are very much, I think, one of the most proactive in Canada as a province, reaching out to potential partners. And we do that in various fashions by inviting them to visit. Our plans last year were, of course, changed like many others. We had a plan to invite delegation and discuss with our friends from Ireland in Montreal and elsewhere in Quebec. That could not happen because of the pandemic. But we do that on a regular basis during key events such as BIO. I'm talking about the big BIO, about the global one, where every year we've been hosting what we call Rendezvous Quebec, which is a big networking event during BIO. Always reaching out to our friends across different states, including in Maryland. And that's how this discussion started. Casual discussion, prearranged meetings during this Rendezvous Quebec event during BIO. And people change, governments, as you know, also change. There are elections and things like that. But the strategy on both sides remained. And as such, on October 15 of 2020, we had a virtual event took place over the internet with the State of Maryland Secretary of Commerce, Kelly Schultz, was signing virtually the agreement. She was in her office signing the actual document. And at the same time, our Minister of International Relations and Francophonie and Minister of Immigration, Francisation and Integration, Madame Nadine Giraud, was signing the agreement in Quebec City on behalf of Quebec. So that shows that this preliminary discussion that started casually during an event became a priority on both sides of the border in Maryland and in Quebec, and was signed on October 15 as a MOU, which primarily focuses on the cooperation agreement between Quebec and Maryland in the field of life sciences and public health. Although we do have an action plan attached to the actual MOU, we were not able so far to implement it in person, but we're very much looking forward to it. And so far, we've been working on implementing it on a virtual mode with our friends in Maryland. So there were several of the stakeholders on both sides that were at the October 15th signing. I'd like to mention on the Maryland side, Juliana Desiderio, who is the Director of BioHealth and Life Sciences with the Maryland Department of Commerce. And she's one of the stakeholders on the Maryland side that we are working with to implement this agreement together, of course, with our companies. And a great example today is Marina, being one of the companies that we're hoping to help bring and find good partners and collaboration for the US market in Maryland.
Well, Laurent, I compliment you on picking one of the best states in America for Quebec to partner with. Now we need to make it happen and get some transaction and deals going back and forth between Maryland companies in Quebec and Quebec companies in Maryland. So that's what I'm going to sort of talk with next. And for the listeners we're visiting with, that was just Laurent Waessa, who's the Senior Business Development Advisor, Life Sciences and MedTech for Quebec Government, stationed out of New York City. And then also Marina Massingham, who is basically CEO of Aifred, a digital health company in Quebec. Let's talk, Marina, a little bit about what interactions do you have already going on in the United States? And what is it that you would hope to achieve in building stronger relationships within the United States, which is really the largest healthcare market in the world?
Today, we have our scientific advisory board is 100% based in the US, leveraging some of the great minds and the expertise within the US market to perfect our technology and to make sure there's a fit with the needs of US customers and patients. We are also planning our clinical trial with more sites in the US than in Canada. So we have a number of US Department of Veterans Affairs sites interested in participating in our clinical trial, as well as some very notable universities in different parts of the US. Going forward, what we're really hoping to do is to take our first generation technology that has been perfected within the Canadian market and the partnership with one of the leading psychiatric centers in the country, in Canada, and starting to develop partnerships that will do our first pilots within the US market and really take what's been perfected and extensively tested and make sure there's a fit with US needs and really trial the technology in the US environment.
So I would assume that in Maryland, which you may be just becoming more acquainted with because of this partnership between Maryland and Quebec, you know, we have some outstanding research institutions there with Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland, both with their health systems as well as their universities. And maybe you may not know, but University of Maryland in College Park is one of the top 5 quantum computing universities in the United States.
I wasn't aware of that. That's fantastic.
It is fantastic. And as a matter of fact, I just saw today a press release. There's going to be a new quantum computing IPO that's emerging technology coming out of the University of Maryland and College Park, and it's going to establish itself with a $2 billion valuation when it goes public. So that's pretty good news for Maryland, and it's in an area that is directly related to what you do every day, which is in the AI space. So we're hopeful as you get introduced more through this webinar we're going to be doing, that have you been considering establishing an office in the United States to operate from to complement what you have with your headquarters in Quebec?
Yes, we've been looking at that. I already have 3 team members based in the US. And for us, it's very much the next logical step. There's a number of great reasons to do that, from attracting US funding, government funding, to attracting investment from US investors, to obviously credibility with customers, having our base of operations there. I think, like many companies, COVID has put a bit of a spanner in the works in the short term, but that's certainly something we'd be looking at doing within the next year to 2 years.
We basically have a great location for you.
Ah, fantastic.
Sure. It happens to be in the state of Maryland and multiple places.
Listen, I love Maryland. I used to live in DC. I used to come and watch the Orioles play in Baltimore. I learned all about baseball in Maryland. It's a great state.
I would imagine there's a number of people that could get you a few tickets to some Orioles games if you ever come back here.
Fantastic. I'm in.
So let's talk a little bit about the future, and then we're going to close talking about our digital health forum. But Laurent, what are some of your future goals and aspirations you have for your responsibilities in the life science and medtech area for the government of Quebec?
Number one, I'll save some for later on March 25th. So please, anyone listening, please remember to connect on March 25th, because I will have some interesting data and information on the AI cluster in Quebec, which is a key cluster in general in terms of computing power and engineering power, but dedicated also to the healthcare sector. That's what we'll be talking about on March 25th. So I'll save some for later. So that's my target in terms of next step, because we want to be able to not only talk about the excellence of science, but how it makes sense to work with us and how easier it actually is to work with our companies and be able to be a partner for the stakeholders, starting with the hospitals and big pharma and big bio companies that need this type of technology. So please just remember to connect with us and listen to that. The other opportunities I'd like to bring is during the year of 2021, and maybe even with your group, Rich, and others, be able to bring the capabilities of Quebec as a partner. I mentioned clinical trials being one of the opportunities. It may be also in manufacturing. I mentioned some of the key stakeholders in Quebec that advance those type of trials. We also have companies that are well positioned to be potential partners for Maryland. So hopefully be able to deploy some of those programs and meet the right people on the Maryland side, so that we can help facilitate those collaborations. So as you can tell, Rich, there's lots to do. We'd like to start first thing first. So we'd be with Marina and other of our AI health firms. And so we'll talk about that on the 25th. But moving forward for the whole year, we have packed a program of activity, hopefully in person, maybe by the end of the year. The next one I'd like to mention is in a few days in Montreal, very important event called Effervescence, which is a great conference. It's created by the Montreal cluster in life sciences called Montreal in Vivo. If you need more information, you can always reach out to me. And that's just in a few days, taking place virtually in Montreal, Effervescence Life Sciences event.
This is a good beginning for people to become acquainted with all of the great resources you have in Quebec. I know that we're going to have opportunities to partner on many more things going forward. Marina, let's talk a little bit about some of your future growth goals. What are some of the ambitions you have for Aifred?
So we have a very exciting year ahead of us in 2021. The first one is taking our AI model for treatment selection into clinical trial. As I've mentioned, we are still recruiting sites for that trial. And so I would encourage anyone who might have an interest to reach out to me regarding that. Also, we are looking to prepare our first pilots as well for our first generation technology. And again, that will be a very exciting step for us. Hopefully during the course of this year, COVID permitting, or at the latest into early 2022. As Laurent mentioned, there's Effervescence happening very shortly. I'm actually one of the speakers during the Creative Collisions event during Effervescence. So if anyone wants to hear a bit more from me, they can tune into that. And we'll be discussing the impact of AI on the future of healthcare.
What's the date of that event, Marina?
That event runs, I believe it starts on the 15th through to the 17th. Is that correct, Laurent?
That's in March, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
well, if anybody has any interest in that, we can provide both of your contact information because there will be a written transcript of this podcast, which people can see, and we can include the information on that event in that transcript so that people can see how to get connected to that. I think the most important thing, though, is to make people aware of this event that Laurent has talked about, our partnership with the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore and Michelle Willey, its CEO. Her vision for having a digital health forum because of how topical it is of what is happening in the world today, which it really links to what we're doing with our big annual forum in September 13th and 14th, with Laurent has had a chance to participate in before the 7th annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum. And the theme this year is going to be big data and big bio converging. So we know that one can't be standalone. It's basically the integration and interoperability of what's going on between those two segments. So we're going to kick off this by having a digital health forum March 25th from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, which is free for everybody to register to. And again, we will put the contact information on how to register for that forum in our follow-up to the podcast. And you'll be able to find information on how to register for this event and hear Marina and Laurent again, as well as many other speakers that will be involved over that 2-hour webinar, which is going to educate people about the importance of AI, machine learning, quantum computing, and the impact it's having on healthcare today. Before we close, Marina, you have anything you'd like to say to the listeners?
I think this is a tremendously exciting initiative between Maryland and Quebec, and I'm so glad to have been invited here today to speak with you both and introduce Aifred. I'm very much looking forward to the Digital Health Forum event later this month. Thank you so much for a great discussion.
You're welcome. Thank you for being on BioTalk. And that was Marina Massingham, who's the CEO of Aifred. And also, Laurent, any closing comments?
Well, first of all, thank you, Rich. And also thank you, Marina, for your time. Number one, I'd like to wish everyone good health and good spirit. One way of doing that is by working with great partners. And that's how we'd like to position ourselves as being a great potential partner for you, listeners in Maryland. So please keep that in mind. We also would like to invite you to connect with your own stakeholders in Maryland. We understand that a trade goes both ways. Our focus from New York is looking at building a pipeline of opportunities of Quebec companies coming into Maryland. But it's true also on the reverse. So I'd like to just encourage those listeners in Maryland who have an interest in the market in Canada, starting with Quebec, to reach out to your Department of Commerce and within the state of Maryland or the U.S. Department of Commerce with the U.S. Consulate in Montreal, because there's great opportunity for you as well to look at in terms of export trade for your business. With that, I'd like to wish everyone a great day.
Well, thank you, Laurent. Laurent Waessa, who's the Senior Business Development Advisor, Life Science and MedTech, Quebec Government, stationed out of the New York City office. So thank you both for being on BioTalk, and look forward to catching up with you again in about less than 3 weeks for the Digital Health Forum on March 25th from 1 to 3 o'clock. So thank you both for being on BioTalk, and we hope to continue this dialogue as soon as we get into the webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.